वंदे बोधमयं नित्यं गुरुं शंकररूपिणं यमाश्रितो हि वक्रोऽपि चंद्रः सर्वत्र वंदते. My namaskar to all you present here on the eve of the first International Yoga Conference. Okay, my topic is Yoga for Social and Global Transformation. Needless to say that yoga is the ancient cultural and spiritual heritage of India. It has come down from the traditions of saints, seers, sages, rishis for the individual, society and the whole humanity. Yoga is the most glorious gift of India to the world. Yoga is the divine gift revealed to the ancient sages so that mankind could have the opportunities to realize its divine nature. Generally, the teachings of yoga were passed on from guru to their disciples. Through personal experience, yogis were able to guide the sincere aspirants. It was slowly evolved and developed by ancient and modern seers, yogis, during different periods. In Vedic period, Vedic seers laid the foundation of yoga through extensive experiments with yoga in the laboratory of their labs. Self-realization is possible through the union, that means yoga. This has been the universal message of Upanishads. In the 6th century, we see Lord Buddha's influence brought the ideals of meditation to the fore. Credit goes to Maharshi Patanjali for codifying yoga. In the 8th century, Adi Shankaracharya enlightened the light of yoga of knowledge, yoga of wisdom. In the Middle Ages, saints like Kabir, Tulsi, Meera, Ravidas, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu flowed the different streams of yoga such as yoga of knowledge, yoga of action and yoga of devotion. In the medieval period, Hatha Yoga was evolved and became very popular. Guru Gorakhnath, Swami Svatmaram, Ghiran Rishi were the great Hatha Yogis. In modern period, great yogis like Ramakrishna Paramhans, Swami Vivekananda, Maharshi Aurobindo, Maharshi Raman, Swami Shivananda, Paramhans Yogananda, Yugrishi Sri Ram Sharma Acharya, Swami Ramdev etc. made a remarkable contribution to the development and divine tradition of yoga. Today in the 21st century, we are witnessing the grand celebration of yoga worldwide as International Day of Yoga on every 21st of June. I think the next point is yoga meaning and concept. I think enough light has already been said on this topic. Therefore, I proceed further on problems and challenges of the day. Next. Okay. Today we are witnessing so many problems and challenges of the day. On personal level, a person is suffering from so many physical, mental problems, psychosomatic disorders, anxiety, stress, depression, frustration. Suicide rate is increasing every day across the globe. As for social problems, we are witnessing so many social evils in form of crime, corruption, violence, hatred, intolerance. We are witnessing global issues, challenges like terrorism, religious fanaticism, racial hatred, territorial disputes, global warming, climate change. What are the reasons behind all these problems? In a straightforward line, we can say that our faulty lifestyle has created all these problems on personal, social and global levels. Lifestyle disorder, mechanical lifestyle, materialistic approach to life, lack of moral human values, lack of a spiritual vision are the reasons which have created all these problems. What are the solutions? It is here yoga opens its door to curb all these problems. We have to see how Ashtanga Yoga, 8 steps of Raj Yoga can be helpful in curbing all these problems. Yama is the first step of Raj Yoga. Yama refers to our social code of conduct. First one is non-violence, means trying to be non-violent toward all animate and inanimate in thought, word and deed. It teaches us to be sensitive not only to the human beings, but to the entire nature and the environment around us. Truthfulness means being true to oneself and to others. Aste, honesty, teaches us that we should be fair in dealings. Honesty is the best policy. We should always remember this policy in our day-to-day life. Real happiness always comes from giving happiness to others. Life is for sharing and caring. Life is for giving. Brahmacharya refers to celibacy, self-regulation or self-restraint. Aparigraha means non-accumulation or non-possessiveness. It means giving up the tendency of accumulating so many things of comforts for ourselves. Mahatma Gandhi said it beautifully. There is more than enough for everyone's need, but not enough for any man's greed. Under niyams, we have shauch. That means we should practice physical and mental purification. Purity of thought, word and deed. Santosh, we always are in the habit of getting more than what we really deserve. In Hindi it is said, "Eh dil mange more." But we should understand that real bliss lies not in luxuries, but in simple living. Simple living and high thinking, this should be the motto of our life. We should embrace simplicity and avoid discontentment. Maharshi Patanjali clarifies, unexcelled happiness comes from the practice of contentment. Tap stands for austerity or penance. Our life is very precious. Therefore, we should live a life that really matters. Swadhyay, self-study. It's not about reading a newspaper or a news magazine. It is about reading oneself. Who am I? We should always contemplate on who am I. Ishwar Pranidhan, it refers to self-surrender. We should surrender ourselves to the supreme goal, to the supreme ideals. Why? Yugrishi Sri Ram Sharma Acharya, the founder, patron of all world Gayatri Parivar and the one of the greatest yogi of this era, said it beautifully. We should surrender ourselves to the supreme ideals, supreme self, and to become like the supreme and to move ahead on the path of righteousness. Asana is the next step. Asana means a state of being in which one can remain physically and mentally steady, calm, quiet and comfortable. Pranayama means expansion of the vital energy. According to Maharshi Patanjali, pranayama helps in unveiling true knowledge from the darkness of ignorance. Pratyahara is withdrawal of the senses from the sense objects. There is the highest mastery over the senses. through the practice of pratyahara, as Maharshi Patanjali says in his Yoga Sutra. Dharana is concentration. Dharana helps us develop and extend our powers of concentration. Dhyan, uninterrupted flow of consciousness, is called dhyan or meditation. Meditation enables our mind to become calm and peaceful. Samadhi is the state of self-realization. These are the 8 steps, and it's a complete package, yogic package, yogic lifestyle, a spiritual lifestyle which we must have in our life. Social and global transformation. How? Transformed individual is the core of social and global transformation. An individual person is the smallest basic unit of the world family. Therefore, if an individual person is transformed, there will happen the transformation of the society and the globe. When the sun of yoga will shine over the horizon of the world and society, the social evils will disappear and the dream of a peaceful, prosperous, blissful and transformed society will be fulfilled. Now, we just have a look at the views of the great yogis. Maharshi Patanjali says about Yama, he has described Yama as great voice, Sarvbhaum Mahamprata, that means it's universal. There should be no modification due to differences in country, birth, time, place and circumstances. It should be practiced universally without exception. Swami Shivananda, the great yogi of this era, remarked, today in this age of atomic armament, racial hatred, intolerance and distrust, the moral, ethical and cultural refinement of the individual personality upon a worldwide scale is to be realized first and foremost. For the prime and fundamental unit of all wider groups like class, race, nation and human society the world over is the individual man. This is not an impossible proposition, for the divine exists in all beings and it is an integral part of every individual consciousness. The method to try it out is right and true yoga or a spiritual education. Swami Vivekananda said, be and make. First of all, we have to be good human beings. We want to be teachers, we want to be scientists, we want to be researchers, we want to be philosophers. There is nothing wrong in this, but first of all, we must be good human beings. This is what is the teaching of yoga. Mahatma Gandhi has remarked, be the change you want to see in the world, and it is yoga which is capable of converting us into true human beings. Yogi Rishi Sri Ram Sharma Acharya has remarked, the dream of the creation of a divine society for the universal peace, prosperity and bliss can come true only when each one develops divinity within oneself and become a divine and pious human being by refining his thoughts through yoga and spirituality. Maharshi Arvind remarks, the yoga we practice is not for ourselves alone. Its aim is to work out the will of the divine in the world, to effect a spiritual transformation and to bring down a divine nature and a divine life into the mental, vital and physical nature and life of humanity. Its object is not personal mukti or liberation, although liberation is a necessary condition of the yoga, but the liberation and transformation of the whole human being. Dr. H. Nagendra has remarked, yoga is a science of holistic living. It is universal in its approach and applicable to all human beings, irrespective of sex, age, caste, creed or religion. Anyone who wants to raise himself from the lowest level to the highest level of human achievement can take to yoga. I can conclude that for the transformation of society and the globe, there must be the transformation of the individual first. Yoga, of course, can play a vital role in making the individual, family, society, nation and the whole world more civilized, sophisticated and enlightened. Oh, thanks.
First of all, let me express my gratitude to the organizers of the conference and to give me an opportunity to express my views and share them with you on a very important personality, that is Haribhadra Suri in the Jain tradition. Haribhadra Suri was by birth a Brahmin, was converted to Jainism in his young age. There are legends telling us how, in order to understand the Buddhist doctrine, he got entrance into a Buddhist vihara to learn probably the logic as also yogic practices. So here is a person who has probably represented all the three religious traditions of India. It should be understood that, well, yoga is in a way a part of the metaphysical and religious traditions of India, whether it is the Vedic tradition represented by the Upanishads or Buddhism in the form of Vipassana and Prekshadhyana as it is known nowadays, the yoga in Jainism also. In the case of Jainism, there is a very good article written by Sagarmalji Jain, wherein he has taken a review of the yoga tradition within Jainism itself. And he has given us 5 periods, and in those 5 periods he shows how right from the times of Mahavira, his, you can say, sermons and teachings as understood from Acharanga and Sutrakritanga, these are the main, you can say, angas of the Jain canon, Shvetambara canon, and they are supposed to be the true words of, and believed to be so by the Jains. From the language expression also, one can say that, well, that is the oldest, you can say, literature in the Jain tradition. Sagarmalji Jain shows to us that how this tradition continued, and contrary to the general belief of scholars who study these traditions, 3 traditions, many times it is said that, well, they don't take notice of each other. For example, Ramayana and Mahabharata, they are nowhere referred to in the Jatakas of the Buddhist tradition. Jainas do refer, but sometimes they criticize also. For example, Karma Yoga has been criticized in the Uttaradhyayana Sutra as also Nayadhamma Kahao. But then, why I have selected Haribhadra Suri is that he stands out as a person who tries to understand the different traditions, yogic traditions, in the 3 religious, you can say, traditions, and then tries to interact to it, improves upon, interprets his own yoga tradition, and therefore he has contributed about 4 treatises on yoga, Yoga Vimshatika, Yoga Shataka, then Yoga Drishti Samuchaya, and also you can say Yoga Bindu. The title of Yoga Bindu is very important because he says that for the sake of all common people, I have churned the whole ocean of the yogic knowledge, practices, and this is just a drop, essence of it, which is brought for the common people. his main contribution, according to me, is that of equating the lay follower who has got right faith, that is bhavya as he is called in the Jain tradition, as a bodhisattva. And therefore the whole, you can say, journey of a person starting as a lay follower and ending up as a Tirthankara or a Kevalin, everybody cannot be a Tirthankara, that is told in 14 Gunasthanas. And accordingly, now he has coined a new terminology. He says there are three types of, you can say, three stages, you can say, of a bodhisattva. First of all, he has to be a punarbandhaka. That is, it is certain when he makes a resolve to the right direction, he becomes a punarbandhaka. That is, well, he is not bound to be a person who will be consigned to ignorance and transmigration. The second stage is that of samyak drishti, and here Haribhadra Suri says that samyak drishti person, the person with the right faith, is definitely a bodhisattva. And then through the stage of charitrin, when he first of all becomes a simple with 5 vows, and then he becomes a monk, that is Mahavratas, and then he Kshaya and Upashama, these are the 3 stages, through different stages, through which he becomes a Kevalin or a Tirthankara. He goes to the extent of saying that, and therefore the next Gunasthana you can show, these are the 14 stages which have been known from the Jain tradition. And therefore now his own, you can say, arrangement of a pious person as a bodhisattva, he equates the various stages of his spiritual attainments through these Gunasthanas. I won't go into the detail of, because bodhisattva is again of 3 types, then apunarbandhaka, and then you can say charitrin has got 5 stages. So he equates the Gunasthanas with all those things. So his spiritual journey is explained that way. Usually, these Gunasthanas are shown in the form of a pata, and that is in modern times known as Gyanbaji pata. That is wherein you learn something new. It was current among the Upadhyayas to learn the various Gunasthanas, and now it has become the game of serpents and ladders in modern times. This is the origin of this particular thing. Now what we can see is that once he has taken up this idea of a samyak drishti person being a bodhisattva, then we find that the expressions of those things, they come in a different way. May I explain to a moment, you can say for a minute, that well, the idea of bodhisattva sprang up in Buddhism after what is called the Hinayana stage, or you can say the Theravada stage, wherein everybody sought for his own arhathood, for his own prajna through Shila and Samadhi. But then a time came, a change was there in Buddhism, wherein if need was felt that, well, the Buddha actually meant for doing all these things for Bahujana Hitaya and Bahujana Sukhaya. Otherwise, he was at a point when he was about to say that I don't want to say anything after getting my own bodhi. But then the Lokantika Devas, they come, they request him, and they ask him that you should preach your thing. And therefore, Buddha preached for 40 years. So that became the ideal of Bodhisattva, because it is meant for the people. And this idea must have arisen in Jainism right from something like 5th century AD. That is why there is a reference in a story that Jivanta Swami Pratima was, for worship of Jivanta Swami Pratima, a person gave something like 1 dinar for lighting a lamp there. So all these ideas were coming in the mind of the people, but they got expressed properly through Haribhadra Suri. So we'll find that the idea of Bodhisattva, as it is expressed in Buddhism through visual art, so there are expressions. One of the main things is that there is an effigy of the Tathagata which is put on the crown, and that is how he is known as Bodhisattva. There are 5 Tathagatas, there are 5 Bodhisattvas, and therefore, respectively, different Bodhisattva will have a different jina. I think we'll go through all these things hurriedly. So, Bodhisattvas are depicted with a jina on their crown. So, these are the Buddhist representations of Maitreya and you can say Avalokiteshvara, Padmapani. So, with this inspiration now we'll find, these are of course of 5th century AD. Next one. Now, herein comes Jivanta Swami, a concept wherein now the Tirthankara is worshipped while he was still a householder and practicing yogic practices. So, that representation comes around the same period, 5th century AD, is another beautiful image of Jivanta Swami, wherein he wears crowns and ornaments like a bodhisattva. Next one. Here is a late representation of 11th century of a Jivanta Swami. So the cult of Jivanta Swami becomes very popular because the concept of bodhisattva has taken up. Next one. You see, there is a concept of Samavasarana, as it is called. And in that, it is said that all the jivas in this world, they gather together after the attainment of Kevala on the part of the Tirthankara. And very graphic descriptions come right from 3rd century AD. The essence is that he speaks in Ardhamagadi, but every living being listens to it and understands it in his own language. So the message is for all the beings. This is very much connected with another concept of Samyak Sambuddha, wherein it is told that the Buddha should preach to his father, preach to his mother. Mother is already in the heaven. Father, after his death, directly goes to Nirvana, in spite of the fact that he had not become a monk. So this idea of Bodhisattva working for the common people, and then he should preach to all the beings, and then he should appoint his own successor in the form of a Maitreya. So all these concepts, they come along with the concept of Bodhisattva. Next one. This is the idea of Samavasarana, wherein all the beings, they gather into a city which is surrounded by 3 battlements or prakaras. Next one. Here is Kubera is another idea. In Buddhism, Kubera is supposed to be the protector of all the monks as also the lay followers. And therefore, we will find that Kubera also finds a depiction like a Bodhisattva in the Jain tradition. And this takes up, so the role of the Bodhisattva is taken now by the Yakshas and Yakshis, whose cults become very popular, and they become Shasana Devatas. Shasana Devata is those Yaksha and Yakshi, because once Tirthankara attains his salvation, he has nothing to do with the world. So who is going to guide the people? So those are helped and guided by these Yakshas and Bodhisattvas, the laypersons, as told to us by Haribhadra Suri. So these are the depictions of different Yakshas. There are so many, the literature is replete with all these stories of Kapardi Yaksha and Ambika Yakshi, who are the protectors of the Tirtha of Palitana, which is very sacred to Adinatha. So this way we'll find 24 Tirthankaras, they get all these Yakshas and Yakshis associated, who are given the status of the Bodhisattva. There are cults of Jwala Malini and Padmavati, very popular cults. They are also now depicted as the Shasana Devatas, and they on their crown hold the effigy of the Jina. In short, if I have to say, the last one, the yoga of Haribhadra Suri goes beyond the individual happiness and contentment or the spiritual exaltation for the welfare of the world. So Bodhisattva is a Parama Karunika. So Jina is a Parama Karunika. So this way we'll find, if examples are to be given, in the Bhagavata tradition, it will be Shuka, who is the yogi, and Janaka, who is the Rajarshi. The same thing we can say, the Brahmarshi and Rajarshi in the political science. Then in Buddhism, it is the Avalokiteshvara who is the Bodhisattva, and Samyak Sambuddha or Tathagata is the Buddha. So similarly here, these are all Bodhisattvas, and then Tirthankara is something like Samyak Sambuddha. We'll find that there is always a sort of a conflict as to whether a yogi should do for himself. Apparently, all the descriptions tell us that the yogi attadipo, he is alone, anityata, asharanata, ekatva, these are the things. So we'll find that through visual arts also, we find the expression of all these aspirations. Thank you. See, there is another aspect, and that is that a cult of, say, Bodhisattva protecting all the people. Similarly, the Jinas and Baladeva Vasudevas protecting all the people. So, Bhaktamara Stotra inspires in a way the Khajuraho temples. Of course, there is altogether different, you can say, section of that, and that is the so-called erotic sculptures. They are also there in the Jina thing, but they have a different explanation. I think it will require a different exposition also.
We do meditation while closing the eye, but in Jain I found in a couple of, I remember in the place of Rajasthan, I don't remember the name of the place, where 108 sannyasis are sitting there with open eyes. Why it is so?
Before the?
It's in the Pushkar or somewhere, I don't remember, that the people who are meditation, they are opening the eye, they are not closing the eye and doing it. So is it any significance is there, closing the eye and...
I don't know about that, I don't know.
No, okay.
So yoga in the US is seen as part of CAM, which is complementary and alternative medicine. And for the sake of time, I don't want to go too deep into each of these, but what is CAM? So if something like yoga is practiced together with conventional medicine, it's considered to be complementary. If something is used instead of mainstream medicine, the term is alternative. And of course, if something is used in conjunction with, in a coordinated manner, it is integrative medicine. And there are some conversations in the field about how one should just say yoga is integrated, meaning it's already happened, right? So framing of that issue is very important here. Okay, so what is yoga? So this is one of the surveys that has been done by NIH in 2012, and I'm gonna like engage you guys at this point. What do you see here that should be part of yoga? We see that yoga here is in the third category. What else could go under the yoga umbrella, as we know as Patanjali's Eightfold Path? What do we see? Someone just throw things out, including people here if you can see this. Meditation, right. So we know that yoga contains meditation. What else do we see here? Right, so I mean, so yoga nidra, deep relaxation, IRT, DRTs, right? Anything else we see here? Deep breathing, obviously, that's pranayama. And what else? I think there's like one more thing here. Yeah, relaxation, yeah, I think even diet. I think yama and niyama, like if we want to look at the Eightfold Path as a progressive thing, kind of having that self-discipline, I think, is part of yoga. So again, this is a big challenge in how yoga is perceived, and this is a challenge not just for practitioners, but researchers and teachers as well. So we know that evolution of yoga has taken an super interesting trajectory over time, and in this globalized world, yoga has just kind of taken off. So yes, of course, yoga is a huge, huge industry, projected to be like 55 billion by year 2020, right? So there's no stopping it. So what can we do to kind of, instead of like saying, don't do goat yoga or don't do beer yoga, I mean, forcing people to stop that is not going to work. So, so that's one challenge. One of the other challenges is if CAM, complementary alternative medicine, if there's no consensus on what that actually means, then yoga contained within that umbrella also has that issue, right? Because it's like the parent umbrella has that issue. So then the subtopic, of course, is suffering, which we know, or at least that's what my argument is. The other thing is yoga a religion? Is yoga a spiritual practice? Is yoga evidence-based science? Again, if we ask people in this room, probably we'll get a lot of tick marks next to all of these categories. So these theoretical issues lead to issues with research. And again, the paper will have these in depth, and we discuss these in depth. But what I want to kind of focus on are measurement outcomes. So a lot of times we see in research, yes, there's use of control groups. Sometimes control groups, as we saw in the previous slides, people will, researchers will say, oh, well, we used breathing techniques as a control group versus the physical postures. Well, I mean, that's kind of, you know, I mean, again, people in this room may disagree that that's not a real comparison group because breathing is part of yoga. I mean, even if you breathe in and like raise your arm, when you breathe out, you want to drop that arm down, right? So again, second to the last bullet point, some of the other things that are challenging are there is no prescription for how long these practices should last. Should that be like 45 minutes per day for, you know, 14 weeks? There's a little bit of issue with that. So let's see. So as a political scientist, I want to argue that the year 2015, there were two huge punctuations in yoga and healthcare policy, alternative medicine policy. And one was Encinitas' verdict, where the California system ruled that yoga is not a religion, right? It's a practice that has been continued to be allowed in schools. And the other thing, of course, is the International Yoga Day creation. So these two are the punctuations that have occurred in recent history, and I think as you know, in the policy cycle, the window of opportunity is open to define and prescribe what yoga is, and also what yoga is not, because that is just as important. So that is the argument here, and again, I kind of jumped and put the cart before the horse. I think yoga is in the agenda setting cycle. And this too, I think this particular conference is also, you know, a game changer, right? It's like it has never happened before. Lots of resources are being put towards this. And I think who's who are in this room, and we, if we wanted to collectively get together as a working group, sorry, you can't see, to come up with what yoga is and is not, I think that would really, really help researchers. So some of these stakeholders and actors who play a role or would play a role in defining that would be the Indian state, so the government of India, of course, public-private partnerships, academia, so academics have a role, and others, and let's kind of look at that in depth. So the state, this morning, I swear the bullet point, I did not put in that after the ICCR president spoke. I do think yoga needs to be standardized. The other thing is kind of suggesting best practices, so to speak, for particular illnesses and diseases. I mean, for example, Dr. Nagendra mentioned the conference in Haridwar and the conference at Harvard, right? If people want to come up with like best practices for stroke or best practices for cardiovascular medicine, not like a protocol like go do this, but some suggestions, especially in terms of what types of things and the duration, that would be super duper helpful. Again, we see in research all kinds of things come up, like, oh, Kriya Yoga was used, but then like some components are missing or whatever. So research is kind of murky. So one of the things I'm going to argue in paper is that the role ICCR and Ayush can play towards yoga is what Kabat-Zinn has done for MBSR. Any of us looking at any kind of mindfulness literature, when we pick that up, we know that that's an 8-week program, unless modified, and we know exactly what that entails, right? So something like that we could craft for yoga. And that, again, I think would be super helpful. Using mindfulness as an example, I think we could even incorporate that as part of dharana, focusing. I mean, we know that there's all this walking meditation, body scanning, all these things that kind of help people. Of course, they help people. So that I think MBSR can be taken as an example of what we could do with yoga. And of course, Indian states, again, Dr. Nagendra stole my thunder, not really. He mentioned how the states are already kind of implementing this. So of course, the centralized government is putting in resources. The states are adopting this gently. Of course, that's incremental change. But there's scope for this. Other public-private partnerships. Accreditation is huge. A person can just get a yoga certification online for like $200. Something needs to be regulated. And who is the authority who can kind of sort of at least guide, we're not at the regulation stage yet, at least propose what types of accreditation should or ought to exist, right? So that's where the private sector comes in. Us as academics, like lots of people here are professors, what could we do? Well, Dr. Menon and I have been super, super blessed in terms of introducing yoga courses within our department. So that's one way to kind of introduce yoga from an interdisciplinary perspective. And what else could be done at the academic level? Of course, research. Strong, strong peer-reviewed research procedures are needed, right? So that would, of course, that's like a little cycle that would help us with even like new journals. We know about 28 to 30% of yoga research comes out of India, which is great. But then how can that kind of entice international collaboration? How can people here help build bridges and gaps? The last of the last are others, NGOs. NGOs do a lot in terms of promoting yoga. I've seen a few NGOs who are working with the refugee populations in places like Greece. I was there for a month with pre-medical students. And the refugees are very responsive. Why do I bring them up? Because that, again, is like an international pronged plan, because this is a multi-actor plan, right? And the other thing, the last thing I want to mention are lobby groups. So once we kind of sort of craft what yoga is and is not, I think we would benefit from engaging the AMA and Big Pharma to kind of help with some of these things. So again, lofty goals, but like, you know, I think somewhere if we start, we'll get there in the next 10, 15 years. I think that's it. That's Greece, that's Lesbos, by the way. Questions? Thank you.
In the syllabus, have you introduced yoga along with the science? Because yoga has become a pseudoscience because there was no facts. So the pseudoscience has to be changed to a science with the facts.
From my point of view, but when we tried to introduce this, it was much easier to introduce yoga as part of religious studies than it was as a health policy class. So again, baby steps, that's what I did. Anywhere else in the US, I don't think so. But my study abroad course for Greece did have yoga for trauma, yoga for anxiety, stress, depression, those components, and we read peer-reviewed journals, so journal articles. So that's a start. But no, I don't think anyone else is doing this.
Yeah, it also ties in two things. I'm a pediatric dentist by profession, but yoga practitioner from birth and a professional yoga teacher by now. But I did study yoga here at Kripalu School of Yoga and Health, which tomorrow we have one of the speakers, Dr. Satbir Khalsa. He's been the pioneer in research. He will answer a lot of your questions because I studied the modified curriculum that was developed with some evidence-based and modified from my ancient practice with anatomy, physiology, kinesiology of the joint, a lot of Western psychology. So at age 58, I just went for a retreat and I never turned back. And I did 500 hours and I was certified for school. During my training, the code hearing came and we all cheered up. So there is an evidence-based practice going on. The only limitation that we have is a control study because we don't have enough human sample or the standardization, how many counts per breath. But I've been following, Dr. Satbir Khalsa and Dr. Timothy McCall. I took his course. He's a physician, also part of Kripalu original research group. And he and Dr. Shirley Tallis from Patanjali, they four came out with a yoga research condensed book publication last year, June. And Dr. McCall has the first textbook that I had to study. He's a physician, yoga practitioner, where it's like chapter by chapter. And I also took his yoga as medicine course. So it is there in process and it's existing.
Okay, let me take that back. At the undergraduate level, nothing that I know of, but she's right. Medical schools do have these kind of subcomponents where students could take integrative medicine courses. But just as far as yoga is concerned, I'm not sure.
Of course, Maharshi University of Management has integrated yoga practice with its curriculum and a science program, but maybe that's a special case. But the Brown University had a contemplative studies program which had a group of people, including the medical school and others, in a program studying contemplative practices.
And I think medical schools are probably the testing grounds for kind of some of these
things. I would like to mention here Dr. Catherine Cook at the University of Buffalo. not only there are yoga courses, but even the faculty specialized in yoga has been appointed.
Perfect.
So US is very systematically going ahead with the training of yoga teachers, and Yoga Therapy Association has also, not exactly accreditation, but quite a bit close to it. There were 3 symposiums on adolescents and yoga research, and I was one of the speakers there, and we found that interestingly there were 50 publications, and out of 50, maximum publications were from US in different journals. So I would say that yoga research is picking up very much here as well as in other parts of the world, specifically in India. But what is important here is to emphasize that funding for yoga research is minimal. Even
very competitive.
Very minimal. Funding research is competitive, but funding in yoga research particularly is minimal.
Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guru Namah. Thanks to Maharshi Mahesh Yogi and his Gurudev. So, I'm delighted to be here talking about yoga. First of all, yoga is very much alive in terms of our hearts and in research at Maharishi University of Management. And today I will talk about how Yoga Sutra, or parts of it, helps with world peace. I think Umaji was talking about moksha, and I have written one of my books is on moksha. It is on Amazon, and Maharishi University of Management. A lot of the research is experiential and experimental. And what I will report today is about some of the experiments done to help promote world peace in a measurable way using meditation and advanced meditation practices, which straight comes out of yoga, right? The 7th limb is dhyana. So if you could please come to the next chart, I would like to lead with the wholeness. The world is rapidly developing, but development is happening through science, but new grand challenges are emerging. And those cannot be solved from the same level of thinking, scientific thinking, that produced those challenges. These are kind of side effects of modern science. Yoga Sutra and Vedas, the non-dual ways of thinking, being, doing, that are a new paradigm for transforming the self and the world in a way that is very sustainable and leads to peaceful, blissful life for all. And in that context, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has made a tremendous contribution by promoting or inventing and promoting the concept of transcendental meditation and TM Siddhis, and how group meditation can help create coherence, which can negate the negative tendencies in the universe and can promote world peace. And I will end with some call to action, and if the Indian government at the highest levels is listening, they need to invest a little bit in developing the consciousness of the people of India through promoting these proven technologies. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, I have the clicker. I use it. Okay, I'm telling myself. Self-referral, that's what the self-referral is, the secret of peace. So vision. Vision is, suppose it's 2050 and the world is all blissful and peaceful. Describe what happened. What was the path to a peaceful and blissful world in 2050? How do we accomplish the mission of Vishwa Shanti? By developing collective consciousness of the people. How do we go about doing it? And one of our professors who has done maximum amount of research on collective consciousness and world peace and experiments published in so many studies says collective consciousness is just beginning to become aware of itself. It's self-referral. Self-referral has a different quality than object referral. When we look at something else, we are in a different dual mode. When we become aware of itself, it's a very different reality. Becoming self-referral at the individual level is something that we have learned for a long time, but thinking of the collective consciousness itself becoming aware of itself, it's an extraordinary concept that, take a moment to think about it. Now, how does this come from? Where does this come from? It comes straight from Yoga Sutra. Ahimsa padishtayam tat sannidho vairutyaga. Maharshi has translated it in the presence of yoga, in the presence of unity, in the presence of the yama of ahimsa, negative or hostile tendencies tend to diminish, sometimes vanish. This is a source. This is how Yoga Sutra's knowledge connects to world peace. And Maharshi said, long time ago, more than 50 years ago, essentially this thing, that which is if 1% of people could meditate together, they will create enough coherence that there will be world peace. Then he came up with TM Siddhis, in which it became that square root of 1% of the people, siddhas, if they can meditate together, that will have world peace. And I will report on 3 experiments that were done. There are 50 experiments which will replicate 150 times, 150 publications with 150 replications, right? All right, keep me honest. All of these are co-conspirators from MUM, can keep me honest. We are all very much aware of this knowledge. So, setting up the problem, it's grand challenges. These are not problems that you can solve as an expert. And beautifully, I'm a student of management, professor of management, at the Academy of Management last year. One of the giants, Dr. Henry Mintzberg, here, this one, he said, tackling grand challenges is like being shuttled between specialists, right? You go to a cardiologist who sends you a neurologist, who sends you a pulmonologist, who sends you an osteopath. It's like falling sick at the intersection of specialties. It takes unity, the totality of knowledge to solve those problems. What is the key problem? It's pragya-aparadha. Somebody earlier mentioned faulty living style. I think Ajay mentioned. This is kind of the faulty living style, which is that we associate ourselves with body and the stuff needed to manage the body. Solution? Self-referral. Be aware of ourselves. When we are self-aware, we are a different person. We are automatically blissful. Bliss is within. We can just give bliss to other people. Don't have to be just dependent on others for bliss. Many people have talked about where does this state come from. It is the 4th state. You can call it Turiya. You can call it transcendental consciousness. This is different from the waking, dreaming, and sleeping state. This is a state where it's pure awareness and not an awareness of objects. This is Shivam Shantam Chaturtham Advaitam Chaturtham Manyante. This and Sa Atma, that is self. Sa Vigyeya. It is worth knowing. That is the thing that is worth knowing. A lot of other things, are secondary. So here you see that I laid out all the 8 limbs of yoga here. By the way, they're all together. It's not sequential. I would say they go from the more gross, where it's social, to the body, to the senses, like that, to the subtlest level, which is the self. And this is the last 2 ones, the last 3 ones, the Western civilization, Western way of thinking has no way of understanding dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. In fact, Maharshi would say dhyana is not exactly meditation. Dhyana is bigger than meditation. Dhyana is the field in which dharana happens. And samadhi is evenness of mind, which is kevalya, which is unity, which is total oneness. So, there is model of how this transcendence happens. I created a V theory because somebody from MIT presented a U theory at the conference last year at Academy of Management. I said we can do better than that because it was too complicated. I said, we'll do this. So this surface level reality, this is where we live. And we transcend to the bottom, the ocean, the 4th state, the transcendental consciousness. And then we come, so that's how we sort of slowly percolate. And then we come up. So we go down every day, twice a day, or as many times, or as long as depends your practice, and come back up. This is a V theory of transcendence. We would recommend transcendental meditation, but I would say broadly, whatever helps you to transcend the surface reality and come to that pure awareness, that will help you feel the bliss right there. You can feel and enjoy bliss here and now. You don't have to study all the Vedas, you don't have to do this. You can achieve that all today. So what's happening is there's a shift in paradigm. We see the modern paradigm here, materialism, side effect is greed, stress, me, who said they'll mange more. And then this current status is, so everything is disrupted, everything is transitive. Then there's humanism, that's another paradigm coming up. But the real value will come out of transcendentalism. That if we all transcend, then we create this bliss and we come to this idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that we are all one family, this togetherness. Hurting you is hurting myself. Well, why would I want to hurt you? And that is where we are getting, and transcendental meditation as a technology for reaching the transcendence. So that is what we are talking about. So that is the paradigm. Now let me go to the third part of the presentation, which is the research part. What has been the research? As I said, the premise is that consciousness is a unified field. It's not separate. And we are all little particles in that consciousness. If you think of quantum field theory, right, everything is wave function as well as particles in there, depending on where your consciousness goes. So I would say, if you imagine ourselves all as particles, particularized elements, moments in otherwise a unified field, just like your magnetic field, you can't see it, but it's there, right? Just like gravitational field, you can't see it. If I drop it, it'll fall, right? I don't want to drop it. But that's what it is. So there are about 50 or 150 experimentation done, but I will talk about 3 particular ones. They're very big studies in the Middle East, in Washington, D.C., and in Invincible America Assembly in the U.S., where we showed how research showed how life became better. This is one of the first studies, and you will have to see the records to believe that how much this journal, whose editor is from Yale, went to extreme lengths to deny its validity, saying this is an absurd phenomenon that people meditating together can create world peace half the world away. But the data was so compelling. See, this is the 2 lines here. One is the group size. When this dotted line is group size, and this is the composite quality of life indicator. As one goes down, the second goes down. The number of people meditating, as it goes up, the quality of life improves. This is a variety of indicators, individual indicator, collective indicators, stock market pricing, war level casualties, fire incidents, traffic fatalities, variety of indicators, public indicators, they were brought together. This is a publication from 1988, a Journal of Conflict Resolution, the #1 journal in this space. It took many years to get published because the statistics is impeccable, the data is impeccable. People may not understand how it works, but it works. And this is another incident that was in 1985. Washington, D.C. had a few people come in, not few thousand, but then our teams work with the police department, said, what will impress you? They said, if crime came down to 20%, that would be magical. It's never happened. And you know what? They meditated and said, okay, fine. It went down by 23%. And all these things, on various indicators, the results were better. Police was very impressed, so when the paper was published, guess who was the co-author? The chief of police from Washington, D.C. Because he was so impressed that I stand and vouch by this record, because we were proactively told we are going to do this research and this will go up, and it went up. How many studies have you seen where you do this social experiment? You tell ahead of time this happens and it will happen. Another one, this is a very big one, which thousands of meditators, this is our campus, 2 domes. There's one men's dome, women's dome. We are where we meditate. This is inside the meditation hall. You see 1,000+ people on the men's side. Here is the women's dome. Oprah came a few years ago. You probably know her. And she also meditated with a lot of people. She was very impressed, and she had all her employees get to meditation. And here's the result. As these numbers of meditator numbers went up around 2006 till let's say about 2011, look at what happened. Up to 2006, this is murder rate. Like it's going business as usual, right? Growing at 1-2%. And for the next 4 years, what happened? This comes down. And this is equivalent to 4,000+ murders reduced. Because the murder rate went down for those 4 years, there were 4,000 fewer murders than would have been if this trend had continued like this, the blue line. But that's not all. Look at the drug-related fatalities, right? This was going like this, and then suddenly from this time on, and this is public data, this CDC data, this government data, not our invented data. This is public data. It showed that it went down. Sorry. right? So this is equivalent to 26,000 lives saved from fatalities in public. And then there are more such incidents with many other infant mortality and other things. In effect, so I computed about 55,000 lives saved. And inside numbers, let's say about 70, 80 million dollars got spent in supporting these meditators over 4 years. That means the cost of life is $1,500. For $1,500, we were able to save a life. Is that expensive? Is that so cheap? Why can't government spend money to save lives at this little cost? Right? It's a lack of rupees. That's nothing. And then what happens? We continued the research for the next 4 or 5 years, collected the data. As the numbers went down because our funding for some reason dried up, look at the sort of meditator numbers came down from like 2,000, which is square root of 1%, to this numbers. Look at this. For experimental period, the murder rate came down, but after this started going up again. What is the message? That if the meditator group is not sustained, the benefits are lost. In other words, the transcendence has to be continuous. This is a continuous process of supporting the collective consciousness so the world continues to stay blissful. It's a peacemaking activity as much as you would say a doctor's medical activity. So here is my last slide, summary and recommendations. First summary is that our goal is to achieve 2050, or my goal. I won't commit Maharshi University on that, but my goal is to achieve 2050 vision of peace and bliss through yoga and through Vedas and through whatever it takes. The world can be blissful. We have the solutions. Why not? So I would say we would beat the drum for transcendence, collective coherence every day, every minute. And one of the activities is there's a UN World Peace Day coming in September 9th or 11th or somewhere that day. We would like to participate there. We would like to organize a conference on collective consciousness in our own university, and I would probably reach out to consulate and reach out to many of you who would be interested in participating. And then I thought maybe Indian government can spend a few $1 million, right, to support this kind of activity. But at first, at least beat the drum. Ayush Ministry and other institutions like Sandeepani Sansthan, which fund all these yogic activities in India, why can't they support and get behind this activity? It's a very proven technology, 50 publications in top journals, 150 replications. How much more data would you need to be convinced? And then finally, this is some numbers. All you need is about 4,000 siddhas, which is square root of 1% for India. If you want to make the whole world peaceful, it'll be about 8,000 people. Probably cost you 150, 160, $200 million of thing. Chump change compared to the defense budget, right? And the healthcare budget, which is $1 trillion budget. And so many budgets are there. So if you invest just this little bit of money, we can be one family. Thank you.
When you do the meditation, do you have any perimeter where you are focusing on? You do a translation meditation to give the raise. What is the technique behind that? And how you measure that? Can you just a little bit glimpse of that? You can measure that. Because I'm a mathematician guy, so I want to know a little bit of mathematician part, how you are doing the graph.
So this is how this happens, right? For the mechanics is that when people come together, if you think of from quantum mechanical perspective, we are creating positive vibrations in the fabric of consciousness. From a classical mechanics, it will be very difficult to explain. But the measurements are very much public data. We are not inventing new measures as much as measuring crime by various other public data.
How you can quantify that this particular area you are trying to make a piece? Let's suppose you want to make a piece of 150 meters or miles or
okay.
How you are doing?
I took out the fact. So it's like a dosage effect. The impact is higher the closer you are. It's almost like gravitation field. The gravitation is gmm by r squared. The closer you are, the greater bliss you will feel. So you can almost feel that thing, but Maharshi is not given that formula in that sense. But the closer you are, the more. And the more meditators are there, so it's almost like a medicine. The more people meditate, and the closer you are, the more effect you have.
This is just a beautiful presentation. And I'd like to add on also Anjali ji's presentation on that. See, probably people who come from India, the greatest learning, how I would look at it is that it was very much well documented and data driven. So the work that you are doing, so you have a record of it started in this year, these are the number of students, the courses, the credits. Now let me also put it in this way that one of the collaborations that we can have going forward was a brilliant presentation on policies. the research, the budgets. But if you look at Dr. Shubhda Joshi, madam, who introduced yoga as a course almost 25 years ago in Mumbai University. And we have 3 of our professors coming from Haridwar. They've been actually doing this particular work. Now, what is very important is that probably our mindset is not to keep it data-driven. So that's where probably we come to the learning. But if you look at the kind of the students that we have in Mumbai University, especially the philosophy department, they actually are yoga teachers who come to certify themselves so that they become better yoga teachers. So I think off the platform, one of the brilliant things that you have done for is that, keep everything recorded, archived. So for me, if I look at somebody like an Oprah Winfrey doing it, and on a pictorial thing, I think that's a brand ambassador for yoga, right? Yeah. So I think one of the things we can carry forward is to make sure the East and the West meet with the yoga research that you are doing in a different way that you're doing. Thank you so much for that. That's just a comment, sir.
How can we measure, because when we are meditate, its effect on subtle and causal body. But if we have any tools to measure subtle and causal level?
Subtle is subjective. So measurement will, if you go from quantum field theory, the moment you try to measure subjective experience, it will lose that value. In fact, maybe that's what Anjali's point was. When she was presenting, I was thinking, if you try to measure so much, then it loses that creative value. Because its impact is your own devotion. How can somebody measure devotion, right? Yeah. So a lot of the value will come from your devotion. So I think that as you get more subtle on the 8 limbs of yoga, it's harder to measure. You can ask somebody to close their eyes, but you cannot ensure that they're meditating. Yeah. Well, now, of course, with the brain waves, you can maybe do some. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I've entitled this talk, Enlivening Yoga, Samadhi, through the Maharshi Reading Vedic Literature program. And this is based on my thesis, in which I investigated the therapeutic effects of reciting Vedic texts. And just to be clear, when I'm talking about Maharshi in this presentation, I'm referring to the Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, who founded the Transcendental Meditation technique. And while that technique is widely known, lesser known is this reading Vedic literature track that was introduced at the doctoral level at Maharshi University of Management. So I'm very excited to present this because even TM teachers are not that aware of this research track. I'm going to give you this thesis right up front. It's very simple. So this reading Vedic literature program, its intention is to culture the nervous system to maintain samadhi, the state of yoga, to maximize success and fulfillment in every field of life. And I made a note to myself, when I say Vedic literature in this presentation, I'm referring to all the Sanskrit literature. I'll show you a chart a little bit later on. But I want to give you a little bit more information about myself. I call this segment of the presentation Stumbling Onto Samadhi. And that's because, as was introduced, I started off as a classical flutist in training. That's why I came to the United States. I went to a boarding school called Interlochen Arts Academy. From there I went to my dream school, Eastman School of Music, to study with Bonita Boyd. And this was like 12 years into a very rigorous practice schedule. And I was in the practice rooms. Normally I do a 10-minute demonstration on my flute, but I'm going to make it very short. So, okay, so I was going about my usual practice routine. And normally when you're practicing, dancers can tell you the same thing. There's like a goal in mind, like the next audition or the next lesson, and you're always going for perfecting something. But for whatever reason, this one time, I wasn't goal-oriented in my practice session. I was simply engrossed in the effects of the sounds on my state of consciousness. And it proved to be a life-changing experience. And what I was doing was I was playing around with what's the equivalent of alankars, so just very simple patterns of sound. And I became so engrossed in like the emergence and the disappearance of a sound. And at one point, I was so focused on one sound. I just ended up working with one sound. And I was completely engrossed in the aspects of the sound disappearing, 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 disappearing. And at some point, I had no idea where I was. And maybe I was playing, maybe I wasn't. I don't even know if the breath had suspended, but I was in a void, in complete abstract silence. So there I had been playing with sound for 12 years in a very systematic way. And when I arrived at the source of sound, I realized that the whole reason I had been like pursuing music was for these subtler states of experience. And once I hit silence, I realized that, oh, time to change orientation. I really want that. That's what I want. And so I produced this image with the help of a friend to kind of show you the confluence of three major traditions on basically my life purpose, my dharma. So I'm wearing kind of a Japanese outfit because I am from Japan, and I was very much influenced by the subtlety of expression in that culture. So I was already pretty tuned into the subtleties of expression, like even flower arranging or tea ceremonies really to function as a ritual for bringing the attention to subtler values of experience. So I had that background. Then I had the whole flute tradition, and I play the Western flute, but this is kind of like a shakuhachi, which is a meditative tool in the Buddhist tradition. So when I was stumbling onto samadhi at the Eastman School of Music, what's happening is really a vertical direction in the whole process of the creative expression, okay? And I had the word shabda coming out of that flute because it came to be that from classical flute, I ended up exploring techniques, and they were all sound-based. So right after that experience, I told nature, I want that experience, I want to figure out how to get it again because I'm not sure how to get it again. So that's how the whole exploration into meditation happened. And as soon as I heard an introductory lecture on transcendental meditation, it was just describing the mechanics I had stumbled upon. So let's fast forward to, I think this was like, fast forward like 2009, I began the PhD program in reading Vedic literature. And this is the formula, very simple. As Maharshi said, he likes to make complicated things very, very simple. So in a nutshell, you close the eyes and meditate, and then you open the eyes and read the Vedic literature. And that meditate, sometimes you'll find that as transcend, because Maharshi was very particular about the style of meditation that is necessary to get the full impact of the sounds of Vedic texts. So close the eyes and transcend, and so I use the transcendental meditation technique, and then I'd open the eyes and I'd recite for 3 to 4 hours a day. Okay, so this is the methodology more fleshed out. I actually had to consult the thesis or the dissertations of the first group of readers because Maharshi gave that very simple instruction, but then he worked with a group of readers to really make sure that everyone was following a systematic procedure. So you'll notice that everything Maharshi brought out had a methodology to it, and everything is extremely precise, which means that everyone is following the same protocol. So the variations will come in the subjective experience, and I'll get to that right away because that's typically what people want to hear about. So, okay, so every day for 3.5 years, I mean, I do the first part every day anyway, but you practice the TM in the Advanced TM City program, and these come right out of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Then step 2 is you listen to recitation of the 4 principal Vedas. So I don't have any training like the pundits, so I don't even know how to recite the Vedas. I just listen to them. Number 3, I read Vedic texts in the original Sanskrit from Devanagari script. And 4 was the most critical element of our instruction, read with proper pronunciation. So we put all of our attention on the points of articulation, on reading with proper meter. And this is all very comfortable for me because as a music student, I've been doing that since I was 8 years old, listening and repeating, finding my ear and figuring out just how to mimic the teacher perfectly. So I was like ready for this. And then the 5th element, we read in sequence from 36 separate branches of Vedic literature. And then the 6th step of the daily routine is to document your experiences. Okay, so you're all familiar with this kind of a chart. So we would learn the different points. It's very fun because, you know, when you're speaking English, it's all a little bit sloppy. This is a little bit more like how Japanese letters are laid out, you know, just very precise. One letter has one kind of way of pronouncing it, and it's always pronounced that way. Okay. This is a chart to show you how Maharshi laid out all the Vedic texts. Do I have a pointer? I have a pointer over here. The top one? Okay, I have this one too. Okay, so the top 4 right there, that's typically what we mean by the Vedas as I understand it. Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda, but that's not what I'm to read. So the Vedic literature program has to do with all these other 36 branches, and you'll see everything from Jyotish, all the Ayurvedic texts, Right here, Gandharva Ved we even recite. Yoga's right there. I read that a few times because it was so short. We have the Pratishakyas down here. And so like that. Obviously, this is much more than one can possibly fit into a 3.5-year program, even with 3 to 4 hours of recitation. So I had to kind of cut it down. And you can't really see this, but this is what I planned. I planned my route ahead of time. I wanted to make sure I hit on all 36 texts in a 3.5-year period. I really wanted to get the effect of all of them. And this is actually now used because this added to the protocol. This really helped to define for each student how they could possibly manage to get through every aspect. So I actually calculated my reading speed, and then I figured out how many pages I could read in 3 to 4 hours a day, like that. Okay, so let's get to the personal accounts. This is actually a website. If you go to vedicreserve.mum.edu, you'll be able to click on each one of these bubbles, and then it will open up into something like this, okay? So this is an enormous collection of Vedic texts, over 100,000 pages right now, because it was 80,000 at the time I published this dissertation. This is the work of Dr. Peter Freund, and this was his thesis. So it's pretty cool. I'm highlighting the first 6 texts there because I'm going to focus in a little bit on my experiences. Shiksha, if you just click on Shiksha, that's half of the texts that are available, and we're still accumulating Shiksha. So I'm going to just show you, you open up Shiksha, that's the first text. So I'm going to just demonstrate a little bit of what I mean by reciting. So Maharshi was very keen on us reading slowly and precisely. So for example, Madhusudani Shiksha, Shrimantao Shri Nre Haricharana Vatmano Nyasya Chetas Rigvedashtao Vikriti Vivritim Vaidika Shloka Niyam Vyadya Charya Numati. And I won't do the whole 3 or 4 hours of recitation, but like that, you kind of get into a rhythm. And like I said, I had no knowledge prior to the meaning of the text. So I'm going to give you one experience. So let's say I've been reading Shiksha for 3 to 4 hours a day. You start to get a feel for the text. Just like you play Bach for 3 to 4 hours a day, it's got an imprint to it. So for Shiksha, this was the very first text. I read the Shiksha text for 3 months. I said, reading Shiksha facilitated release of stored stress as the organizing effects of its sounds began to balance my internal state. I experienced what seemed like a never-ending process of deep mental, physical, and emotional stress unwinding and releasing. And another experience to just kind of explain a little bit more about this. Reading Shiksha facilitated the release of certain traumatic experiences and emotions that had been held in and under great pressure for years. So this is actually more of an example of the cleansing experience of immersing myself in the Sanskrit sounds. So as you can see, actually at that time I had eczema top to toe. I still have a little eczema now, but at that time, eczema defined my life. So for 10 years, it's like all I knew was eczema, and how can I get through the pain of it? And recitation was like the one thing that could change pain into bliss. It was like a transmutation process. So I'd be reciting, and first I'd feel the cooling effects. Somehow the sounds would go deep into my physiology, and the heat would start to release. And what I'm talking about here is the release of all that inner chaos, all the fire that had been stored. And I would just watch this unwinding and unwinding and unwinding. And I just want you to notice this key point, that there's a witnessing aspect to this entire process. So before, I just knew that I was in pain and in a lot of tension. But in this process, that tension is unwinding. And so I'm witnessing the physiology actually changing before my eyes. And I'd always finish up recitation feeling 100 times better. So, okay, so this is what I did for 3.5 years. And I like to show another text to show how different each one is. You can see how it's its own world with completely different feel to it. And it's just so blissful to like recite, observe the changes, transform, and then come out in a different state of mind or heart or whatever was transformed. And each text would target a different area of my life and a different part of my physiology. That's all in my thesis if you ever want to read it. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the final. Jyotish was really fun, by the way. Reciting Jyotish was just amazing because I had such a clear experience of how everything can be solved in the present moment. You just have to, you know, if you have the ability to be present, all the information is there. And so, okay. This is that bubble diagram that every teacher of Transcendental Meditation uses. And so you see, you know, the classic image of Transcendental Meditation taking from Vitarka to Vichara to Samadhi. And then on that line, you see Advanced TM City program. So that's the training to engage thought at the very source of thought. And so this is how I conceptualized the reading Sanskrit part. So Maharshi was very keen on first transcending to stabilize Samadhi. And then while you're in that very settled state, you recite the text. He said it was very important that your mind is really soaked in pure consciousness. And so what you're doing is, then the arrow is showing an integration of Samadhi at all the different levels, including speech. And the idea is by the time you come out of that threefold practice of TM, TM City, and reciting the texts, then your body is really tingling with bliss. You have a new outlook, you have a new perspective, and then you engage in action. And the way nature would support my desires was actually a whole other area of experiences that I would love to share with you sometime. It was really fun to see how my world would change according to what I was reciting.
Does it take being a classically trained artist to read Sanskrit for 3 hours a day? I mean, it seems pretty rigorous. I mean,
I think it's a very special kind of person that finds this like super attractive, but having said that, I'm so surprised at the kind of people, like I teach this to my students, and I can never predict which ones are going to stick with it. So I had this veteran who had like 3 tours through like Afghanistan, you know, it's like the most stress-ridden kind of physiology you can imagine, and he loves reciting. Huh. So, and I kind of felt like, you know, as I was dealing with my own trauma and was watching the release of all of this, I felt like it was the Sanskrit sounds that was like the one thing I could really get bliss from. And so, like I said, I mean, the training in music helped, but you know, this other kid, you know, he didn't have such a background. So,
any other questions there? I'm also curious, just the relationship between you were playing classical music hours a day and experiencing great. I'm sure you know, we could imagine you really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
What would you say is the comparison? You went from one to another discipline of doing some sounds.
Yeah, I love this question because it's like, to me, the next frontier of my research. So you'd think that with a lot of music, there'd be kind of, it's all about the inner realm. But I never came across the description of like the vertical element of the creative process. So like I said, the higher up I went in musical training, the more outward focused it was. It's like, can you beat that person? Can you sound better than that person? It was just more and more outward. Whereas when I introduced the Samadhi element, it was like, whoa, you know, everything that I do out in my outer life is for the joy. And when I kind of connect with that myself internally, then there's more of this, like at every moment of playing, there's more of this depth to it.
Did you ever find that you got lost in the rhythm and disappeared like you did it with the flute? Or did you just keep moving through? I mean, what happened to the Sundays?
Yeah, the Sundays. I mean, God, you know, this is such a rich domain. But what I love most about recitation was that as I'd read, let's say about 10 or 20 minutes into it, it'd be just like the experience of transcendental meditation, which is why I feel like you need a foundation in transcending, because that means your nervous system is cultured to really move off of sound into subtler elements of it. And so that part was like the same no matter what. I'd read in about 10, 20 minutes. It's no longer that I was reading the text, but the text was reading me. It's almost like my nervous system became like the messenger of that aspect of the text. That's how it felt. It would be so organic. It would come deep from within me, just like a musical experience, but overtake me. And I think the second element that made it possible to transcend was the fluency. And it took about 3 or 4 years to develop fluency to the point where I didn't have to like figure out what that combination was or how to get the sounds out. It's just I could sight read any text almost at 100%. And once I would hit that point of like fluency, plus I had meditated, so I was primed to transcend, now you have this whole domain that's like unique to reciting text. It's like one text would go straight to the heart. And my heart would just start to unfold in waves of bliss, and I would just feel that connection. And then every text had its kind of signature style. But, well, after that whole period, it's like I was familiar, kind of like with Ayurveda, you know, which herb is going to do what. So now it's like, okay, so I want to recite this text because I need a spot check and I want something for my heart. Or let's say I have 30 minutes one day, so I'm like, oh, I'm going to definitely hit the Yoga Sutras because I love reciting the Yoga Sutras so much. Yeah, so, okay.
Very good.
Brilliant.
All right.
Brilliant. Well, I think we've heard a wide range of things in this panel, from the deep, ancient values of the traditions of yoga and how they're expressed in Jain. We've seen a historical perspective, a wonderful, very precise presentation. We're seeing some really important, on the other hand, modern scientific concerns. I don't think anybody's here just to learn a little bit about yoga. I think everyone's concerned, how can you have this knowledge spread much more widely, not just a little bit, much more widely. I think people here in this room think, why isn't every school doing this? And it's very much, the work you're doing is critical for that dream to be a practical reality. And then you hear some really fantastic presentation about the future. If it is in every school, do you realize that things, just the way Karen is talking, it will get like that. Much more elaborations, beautiful, fantastic things related to yoga that you might not even consider dreaming of now. Reciting Vedic literature for a few hours, people who don't know the meaning of it, for the sound value and what it does to their brain physiology. I think the next decades are going to be pretty fascinating.
The kind of experience that each one of you brings over here from different parts of the world, it's so nice to know that, you know, generations have been doing work on yoga. Some of them are known, some of them are not known. Especially Mahesh Yogi's contribution, which many of you are representing, we only heard as children. But what is very interesting to know is that today what Nagendraji is doing, and so many other known and unknown teachers of yoga today are getting those kind of platforms which unfortunately was not getting into the limelight. Of course, this is the first International Yoga Day and the first international conference, but it's only going to become bigger and bigger. So as we end the day, I'd like to just thank each one of you who spoke today, and of course the remaining one will be speaking tomorrow.